Chapter 2 is here whether you wanted it or not. So, what is Chapter 2 about? Let's find out with the IMDb plot. Left stranded in a small town with no way out, Maya must once again face a night of terror courtesy of three deadly killers whose rampage she must put to an end. She really gonna put it to an end? Well, I don't know. We'll have to see. Okay, so here we go. All right, I'll just say a couple of things here at the start. One, fairly new. It's been out for a little while, and I realize it's being released on more platforms by now. So I will sort of keep this spoiler free, but I'm not going to make any guarantees this time around. So you can take that for what it is. If I do spoil something for you, I apologize. As with every time I've done one of these, well, I did with the I guess the other Stranger movies, the original sequel, and then I guess Chapter 1. Great discussion whether they should be doing this or not, this whole remake of the Stranger, whatever. As you may or may not know, as I always, put out there every time I talk about the Strangers, Strangers is a very important movie to me. The original, that is. Really, really love the film, and outside of the Freddys and Jasons and Michaels and those kind of movies, it is up there for me. And the reason for you who may not know is a big reason why I'm even doing this. Why there's a horror score reviews, why there's a reason, why there's a promote horror. It is a movie, that after I saw that movie really, got me from just being a regular horror fan to actually wanting to participate in some way, which has, led me, through these things, the websites and the blogs and social media and whatever. So, if you're happy that I'm here and happy that I've done promote horror and all that stuff, a big credit of that goes to, after I saw The Strangers and my feelings towards that. If you're not happy about any of that, then yeah, you can blame The Strangers and hate The Strangers and maybe even hate Chapter 2 here as well. So, that's the disclaimer. I always put that out there. So I put that out there because so that makes me, much more biased with this movie and what they're doing with this movie and this trilogy and whatever than maybe some of the other things they do. I bitch about remakes a lot, and some are just more important to me. And I think, there's some that are more important to some of you guys out there than maybe some others. Some movies that you don't want them to touch, you don't want them to mess with. And if they do, you hold them at just a different standard, and you want, so much more, or you don't want them to ruin it and whatever. And then when they do, it really pisses you off. So, maybe maybe you can guess where this is going. Before I really, get into it, let's talk a little bit about what happens in this movie. We have Maya here again. She, is the survivor from Chapter 1, and she's in the hospital, and, you're kind of seeing her, is it a dream sequence? Is not. But, she eventually supposedly wakes up, and, before you know it, is being chased in the hospital by the big guy with the mask. And, the other two may or may not be there, we'll see. And, we go through that. It's a really long sequence of that. And, then she escapes, gets assistance, but is basically, traumatized, super traumatized. And, to no fault of her own. Of course she is. You would expect her to be. So, as they kind of played in the first one, and as they've played, in social media, and this whole thing with, bringing the strangers back is who is a stranger? Anybody could be a stranger. Don't really trust anybody. Anybody at any time could be one of them. You just don't know. They played it up in the first one. They played it up with a lot of the marketing for this one. And, she really feels that this time. She gets in a car with some people she recognizes and whatever, but it's just so paranoid and so traumatized that eventually she jumps out and makes a run for it. So the entire time she basically is trusting no one, and is running again from the strangers, and until we have an eventual showdown with her and the strangers again, and we see an outcome there. So, that's kind of the basics of what is happening here. So now let's get into it, and let me complain and bitch and moan and all this other stuff. Again, remember, I'm biased, just not happy they decided to do this whole trilogy again. I had hopes that, okay, they're going to do it. Can you present something of interest to me to make me like it? Obviously, I'm going to be biased all the way along. Whenever Chapter 3 comes out, I'll be biased again. I will hold it to a high standard and want something very interesting and just more from it. Because, at the end of the day, ultimately, one of the things I liked about The Strangers, and what has always been a thought process with The Strangers, is basically, as you watch the movie, they are what they are. They are strangers, and their random just attack on the couple in the first one, the original movie, is just just a different a level of terror in a such a simple but different way, because you have no idea who they are. Never figure it out in the movie. Lots of times in horror movies, we figure out stuff about whoever the killer or killers are in the movie. You typically are given something. They give you like something to go on, a reason why they're there. And at the end of the movie, basically they're just like, well, it's because you guys were here. You guys are home, you guys are in this house, and that's the basics of it. Not because you did this or that, not because we have a history here in this house, not because we're haunting the house, not because we were sitting here waiting, not because of any reasonable reason, just because you were in the house and we came knocking on it and blah blah blah. Other people had theories about this and that, and maybe there was other reasons, and maybe obviously at the very end of the movie, they have the two boys, and maybe they give you a clue that has something to do with religion or not, who knows. But for the basics of it, they are strangers, and they are about as normal people as they can, and they've just come there to terrorize the couple and basically leave them to their death there. And I think that's such a big thing. And then I think the problem, or one problem I have with this one, is that they're almost giving us too much information, or they're trying to give us information about the strangers. And when I watched the original one, there's a side of me that when I walk away from it, is but I want to know more. I want to see them under the mask. Who are these people? There's obviously that curious side of me, and obviously there's somewhere inside of me I want to know. I want to know who they are, why they really did this, what is going on there. But then there's the other side of me that says, no, what makes the movie so good, at least in my opinion, of course, is that you don't know, and that it is so random, and that it could happen to anybody. And when we see other horror movies, and then the killer or killers come out, and then later you find out the reason, okay, well then maybe it can't happen to me, because they were specifically going after this person for that reason, or that house for that reason, and it kind of washes you away of the possibilities of you ever being in that situation, or at least relating to the characters or what has happened here. But in the stranger situation, it could happen to you. You could come home. You could go on vacation to a house or whatever. And just some random person for some random reason. We see it a lot of times with serial killers. Some of them just, the person's in the wrong place, wrong time, and it happens. And that just makes it that much more scarier. Obviously sometimes with serial killers, they're obviously looking for something. There's a reason, blah, 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 and then you find that out later. But here with the strangers is you really just don't know. So here with this trilogy, I think, one of the things that they're trying to do is to narrow down the strangers. Yeah, it can be anybody, but it is more specific people, and it is for a certain reason. And one of the things they do in this movie is these random flashbacks of a couple of kids when they're younger, and you're obviously seeing that these are the strangers, or the strangers when they're young. And it is a little bit random, and then you eventually do something really bad by the end of these flashbacks or dream sequences, whatever you want to call them. And you kind of see, okay, well, this is how the strangers were born, or why they're bad. And it's kind of giving you something finally, something a little bit more concrete with the strangers. And I don't know, I'm not here for it. Like, I don't, like, again, I think I'd rather not know. And even if they wanted to play on this, okay, when they did chapter 1 and the couple gets there, and they're kind of in that diner or whatever, and looking at all the people, and of course, some people are being more aggressive than others, or some people look more suspicious than others. Okay, I can see, you can go with that. Okay, a little bit curious. Is it that person? Whatever. You can kind of play the guessing game, and, is it them? Whatever. Okay, that's a little bit interesting, giving you a little something there. And then they kind of play it a little bit in this one too, when she kind of gets picked up. Are these people really the strangers? Are they not? Are they there to hurt her? Are they not? They bring in the sheriff, and the sheriff is looking for people too. So, and then there's some hint that the sheriff is not a good person. So, is he involved? Does he know? Does he look the other way? What is going on there? So, yeah, there's those questions that may or may not intrigue you. Maybe you're curious, maybe you're not. But then they just do these random, flashbacks of these kids. And obviously they're not, really pinning you down on who the strangers are. Obviously, they may narrow it a little bit to who they may or may not be, and I'm talking about the adults. But because they're not making it defined, like, okay, here's the guy with the mask, here he is. Here's the girl with this mask, and here's the girl with that mask. Having these flashbacks is just weird. There's no one to, really connect it to. Obviously, you connect it to the guy with the mask, whatever, but you don't really know him. It's not like you're really seeing him have this flashback. You're assuming, it might be this person or that person, whatever. And then they do this whole dramatic thing where, here, spoiler alert, towards the end, where one of them, okay, semi-spoiler alert, I guess, let's just say one of them gets, even more emotional, and then that's kind of why we have this sequence. So you kind of know that it's coming from, one of them, this dream sequence where you actually see something really bad happen in the sequence when they were kids. And then you know that it's coming from them because the scene is kind of focused on them. But again, you don't really know them. You don't know who they are. So to me, there's just this huge weird disconnect. Like, usually when you do that, the character, you're seeing them, and then you're seeing them when they're little, so whatever. And it just, I don't know, to me, there's a disconnect there. So you're trying to fill in some blanks. You're trying to give something to these people behind the mask, but you're still hiding the people behind the mask from the audience. So I don't, to me, it just doesn't work. Like, I don't know. If it works for you, I mean, great. But, it is like giving a ton of backstory to someone who you just don't know. Like, here's a bunch of backstory, but who does this backstory really connect it with? Like, who? Who are we talking about? Who are we seeing in the present that this backstory is really going to kind of make me either care or not care, whatever? Yeah, it's the guy with the mask, but we know nothing more. Then he shows up and he wants to kill people. Like, okay, so that, but we know nothing else about him. So there's, nothing there for me to care or not care or know or not. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to work. Like, I don't know. And again, like I said, I don't want to know. Like, I'm fine with them if they want to play with, show us a bunch of characters. And, the guy with the mask could be that person, this person, that person. Or the girl, one of the girls could be that person, or that person. Or the other girl could be that person, that person. That's fine if you want to play, that around. Or Or maybe, you come up with something different, surprise under the mask for somebody else. I don't know. That is fine. But, obviously when they came out with this and decided to do this whole thing, they obviously said, okay, we're starting here, we're ending here. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do with the strangers. This is our idea for the strangers. And, I would say to this point, the first one was a lot obviously similar to the first movie to a certain point. And I guess this was, where it was going to give you more and kind of take you in a different direction or make it more interesting or give you something for the reason for them to do a chapter 1, 2, and 3. This is where you wanted to kind of propel and head towards that, where you're going, so that when you watch this whole thing play out, you say, okay, from chapter 1 to 3, okay, I see it all. This is really good, and whatever. And you probably want the trajectory of that to go like this, or at least, okay, so the first one is much like, the original. So, you may not be going anywhere, you just hope that you just don't, here's the original. You don't want to be way down here, and you really are down here, though. And you want to go up here, and instead this one just, wherever you thought, this one just right back down. Another problem with this movie is, I thought, okay, she wakes up in the hospital. That's fine. I mean, whether, I don't know, I don't remember if they stated whether it was a certain amount of time later, if it was, a year later or months later or days later or the next day. I don't remember if they stated that or not. But whatever time it is, it's not, that hugely. I don't think it was that long, but whatever. It is, and if they want her to wake up, whatever. I almost thought, once the first one ended, that maybe the second one would happen and we'd see the strangers terrorize someone different. And then in that, terrorizing somebody different, we would then learn something new about them. Whether it was somebody would come to the town or they went somewhere else. I think, to me, at the end of the very original one, the fact that they get in the truck and they go away, you think that, to me, I think that, oh, wow, these people are on the road. They could have pulled over anywhere, and they could have done this. They could have hit the road, and they could be, nobody really knows this truck. They could go off and kill anybody anywhere else. And that's another thing that was kind of terrifying about them, that, they could do this to anybody. They could go anywhere else. Did anybody really see or know whatever? Obviously, the two boys, kind of saw, but did they know that those people did the killing or not? Who knows? But the fact that they seem to kind of bog this down into this one area, this one town, this one area thing, like, I don't know, again, something else that takes away from it. I just, would have rather seen them do that. And then if you wanted the girl to kind of play a role in it or whatever, make her maybe come back in a part 3 for somehow. Maybe she tracks them down, figures out who they are, something stupid like that. I mean, you're already on the wrong track. You could do something stupid like that. I don't know. I would have rather seen them do and chase somebody else. But obviously, they want to, I guess, call her a final girl, pick her as a final girl here, and run with that and follow her story all the way through. Kind of like you never really got the conclusion at the end of the original one. Does she, she's kind of crawling there, is she dead, not, does she live, what happens there? It is like, okay, so this one is like, okay, she did live, and now we're going to see what happens, for sure what happens after that. And, okay, so that's an idea, I can see that. But to me, again, in my mind, I would rather just not, like, okay, did she live? Did she not live? What is happening? Whatever. Leave it at that. It is fine. We don't have to continue that story. It's, I don't know. To me, it was fine. But here we are. So the problem continues is that when she wakes up in the hospital, we just have this long, I don't know, I don't want to watch the movie again. I really don't. But if for any reason I did, I would love to, watch the time and to see how much time they spent from her waking up. How long is this movie? It's just almost an hour and 40 minutes. From the time her waking up, there's just a huge chunk, or I don't know, it just seems so drawn out that she's in the hospital, she's there. Then the whole scene where he comes and he's chasing her, I don't know, for whatever reason, it just seemed to take way too long. Like, that just seemed to take up a huge chunk of time, of trying to scare her in the hospital, trying to drive the intensity and the suspense while she's in the hospital, with him chasing her, with maybe other people popping up here and there. It seemed too much. It was too much. It was just like, okay, you tried one big scene with her there in the hospital, okay, move on. Have her escape, let's move on to the next area, whatever. It just, I don't know, it just seemed too much. Like, move forward. Like, stop having her run around this hospital. So I don't know. I don't know if it was just a feeling or if it was a fact. I think I saw at least one or two other people kind of mention the same thing. Like, what is with this long hospital thing going on here? But, I felt it when I was watching it. Like, okay. And I don't know. And it just wasn't scaring me. And, like, what she was doing, whatever, was just, I don't know. Like, I could see what they were trying, but it just, for me, it wasn't working. Maybe for others it was. I don't know. Maybe it is because, we've seen now so many Stranger movies combined between the original, the sequel, then this remake one, that now when you see these people pop up in the mask, maybe, really the effect of it is just becomes less every time. Maybe that's also part of it. So when he's chasing her there, it's just like, okay, whatever. It's just not as scary as it originally was. I also found it very weird that she has very little dialogue in this movie. Like I said, she's traumatized and, doesn't really want to talk to anybody, doesn't talk too much, doesn't say much. So she spends most of the movie not saying anything. I mean, she's the central character or whatever, and she's just traumatized the entire time and doesn't say much. She has times here or there, but overall, when you look at it for the main character, she says very little, and obviously the strangers say very little too. So, dialogue is coming from people who, when you seeing them in their regular thing, and like there's a part with the sheriff. The part where she gets in the car, the other people in the car doing most of the talking. She ends up somewhere else later on. They end up doing much of the talking. She's not doing a whole lot of talking in this movie. So that's another weird thing and a weird choice for them to do. I don't know, especially since, you obviously have some sympathy for her. She's being chased by a bunch of crazy people and so forth. So, you do have a little bit of sympathy maybe. But, do you really? I mean, to me at this point, can we, like I said a few minutes ago, can we just kill her and can they chase other people now? Like, I might find that more interesting. And like I said, if they really would have just picked up on them terrorizing somebody else, and then, yeah, you can make the argument, but then we have to learn about those people and why they're chasing those people, and then we get introduction to maybe 2 or 3 more dumb people. I mean, really, that we don't want to care about, and we have to go through that whole exercise again. Yeah, okay, we do. But again, I don't know, but I would think that, the goal in that would be then to use that to reveal something different about the strangers or clue us in on who the strangers are, if that's where you're going to go with this. I mean, really, in Chapter 3, when it ends, are they going to say, okay, this guy was the guy, and this was the woman, and this was the woman, or this was this person, and that was that person, and that, the sheriff was this guy, and this guy was that one, or people take turns, or one time it's this person and that person, or the whole town's in it, or not, or these people just are, like I said about the first one, these people are random, they stayed here for a while, and now they're moving on. By the end of the third movie, they're moving on, and they're going to go cross country, or they're going to go to Canada or something. I don't know. Like, where are we going, and how this is going to end? By the end of this, are they still going to be strangers, or are we going to know? And to me, again, I see that they sprinkled it in, with this whole flashback thing, of giving you some background of maybe why they decided to go the killing route, but not necessarily who they are. So maybe they'll still keep that a secret in a way. Because I really, I don't know. Once we see the third part, we'll know kind of, what the thought process was, where they were going with this all. And then we'll see. But to me, you keep them as strangers. Like, to me, that's the whole point. They're strangers, and that's who they are. And as much as there's a curious side of me that wants some information, and usually with some horror movies, if I'm not given certain things by the end of the movie, yeah, I get mad. I want to know. I don't like them giving me certain things and not others. There's some movies that do that, and that also pisses me off. But for this one, in this circumstance, the title is The Strangers. You want them to be strangers. You don't want to lock them into something. I think that would defeat the point. So, that's kind of my thoughts, I guess, on the whole Stranger Things and what they're doing, what they've done so far, the whole thing. So, maybe not a lot. Not my thoughts, just everything on this movie, but just everything in general with regards to the Strangers and where we are at this point. I will watch the third movie because, again, I probably will not like it and use it to bitch and complain and say a lot of the same stuff I just said. But again, I really want to see where they're going and how they ended, and do they keep them as the strangers, or do they just give us way too much and whatever. I, again, hated this movie. I think the first one, I don't know if I gave it 1 pool of blood or 0.5 pools of blood. But yeah, this was just not good. Her not speaking, not doing nothing, way too much time in the hospital. And then this whole, flashback thing that just seemed so random. There's just really nothing that I liked here. And again, they just weren't as terrifying this time around. I don't know if it's because I've just seen them now in the mask too much, or what was going on. Or maybe it's just, again, being biased, and I going into it was probably not going to like it, knowing that I was not going to like it, knowing that there was probably very little they could do for me to like it, so that I didn't like it. Lots of things, possibilities there. But, when I turn and I look at IMDb and I see 4.7 out of 10 and, just under 5,000, ratings here, I don't think I'm totally wrong. And 4.7 is actually much better than I would have thought. So I guess, maybe they did do something good. But yeah, I'm not going to give this more than 0.5 pools of blood. And, that probably just has to do with the fact that it is the strangers in some weird way, and that they probably stabbed or killed somebody the entire time. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember how many people they killed here. I know there was one in the dream sequence, and yeah, I'm not so sure how many people there were actually killed in this movie. That, if I were to ever watch it again, which I seriously doubt it, that will be a second thing I look for. Now that I think about it, I don't think that it was that many. So yeah, that's another problem. So yeah, I'm giving it 0.5 pools of blood. I'm not going to put you through any more misery, any more my complaining about the strangers. If you've sat through this this entire time, I definitely thank you to let me vent. This is more of a venting session than maybe a review, but whatever, of the chapter 2. And, maybe you'll join me for chapter 3 or not. We'll see. So with that, horrorsquarereviews.blogspot.com is where you can find all of my reviews, written in video. Certainly tons of video reviews for a while now. So you can like and subscribe and do everything else that everybody wants you to do here on YouTube. If not, no worries. It's okay. I thank you for your time regardless. Twitter, Facebook information down below. You can reach out to me there. Complain about chapter 2. Or if you really like chapter 2, you can tell me how much you loved it and I'm completely wrong. Whatever. That's fine. And in the comment section as well. If you really love chapter 2, really love what they're doing, and think completely opposite of me, feel free to put that there. We can talk about it. And with that, I will catch you on the next review, horror fans.